Hello, I'm your host, Mike Gelb, and this is the Consumer VC podcast, where we discuss the intersection of venture capital and consumer innovation. If you're enjoying the show, also subscribe to our newsletter at theconsumervc.substack.com. All content and episodes are for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not investment advice.
Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about aventure, a new platform that's about to launch that's making venture capital available to the masses. It doesn't matter if you're accredited or non-accredited. aventure provides an opportunity to diversify your investment portfolio and invest in private funds. If you're a fund manager, the aventure app also provides everything you need in order to make startup investments, including extensive research materials, seamless transaction processes, and allocation measures so you can properly diversify your portfolio. Now, typically, venture capital and startup investments are liquid, which is a major pain point for our industry. aventure is fixing this by offering periodic withdrawals for its investors. I and many others in this industry are so excited about this launch. They are preparing to list their first fund in the beginning of next year. So if you want to be the first to know, join their waitlist at aventure.vc.
Our guest today is Chris Ashenden, founder and CEO of Athletic Greens and AG1. AG1 is the world's most comprehensive and convenient daily nutrition product in green powder form. We discuss the early days of starting Athletic Greens, from his motivation for creating the product to how he approached marketing and partnerships, the shift in his target demo for the brand, or rather the evolution of the target demo for the brand, how they grew, and how he thought about creating a new consumer habit and a subscription. There's a lot to unpack in this episode when it comes to brand building. Without further ado, here's Chris. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you today?
Mike, good to be here, my friend. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. Let's start from the very beginning. Were you always fascinated and interested in nutrition?
This is a good question. So when I was growing up, I lived for a period in Japan and traveled the world with my family. When I got back to New Zealand, it was the first time I began martial arts, despite having been living in Japan for multiple years. And I became obsessed in a guy called Bruce Lee. And he had this overall approach around absorb what is useful, hack away the unessential, and focus on the few things every day that truly matter, and apply that to his overall approach to martial arts. And as part of that was a fascination in exercise, which then ultimately morphed into nutrition. So when I was 16, my sister bought me a copy of a book called Optimum Sports Nutrition by a guy called Michael Colgan. For good or bad, because plenty of information and recommendations have been fully debunked, I read it and reread it so many times, I had to rebake the spine of the book with masking tape a number of times. And that was sort of the beginning of what has been a lifetime fascination with health, fitness, training, nutrition, and sort of how to unlock, in the early days, high levels of performance. And then as time progressed, more and more concerned with health and sort of optimizing a spectacular life.
When did you first get into or start to understand these supplement drinks, green juice, and green powders?
So I studied a Bachelor of Science Sports and Exercise Science at the University of Auckland, which is a small program, and it's pretty good. And I got right to the end of that and dropped out with 2 classes to go to start my first business, which was a first proper business, which was a small supplement company selling protein and creatine. And my interest has not waned from that period until now. That business didn't end up working well. I took a lot of ownership and a lot of learnings out of that experience. And it was many, many years before I stepped back into what my passion had been as it related to health and fitness from building a business perspective. But I've had jobs as a trainer. I've worked doing nutrition consults. I've done a lot of different pieces over the years inside the industry. And the passion there has never waned. The big catalyst came where in 2008, by 2008, I was getting sick all the time. I literally was having 4 courses of upper respiratory tract infections a year, generally being prescribed antibiotics for those. I was deeply fatigued. I was getting sick all the time. And I'd been playing rugby in Australia at that stage and just got completely over being crook. And I ended up coming to the US to a clinic recommended by a friend who did a lot of testing and we did a huge amount of testing. I literally spent $35,000 on every blood, stool, saliva, urine sample you can humanly imagine. I think the record in one day was 51 vials of blood out of my arm. And out of that experience, I came back with this awareness that my body just wasn't absorbing nutrients properly. And that led to a couple of different pieces. One, this clinic who were great to me, they customized my blood biochemistry $100 a day supplement regime, which is about 50 pills. And I came out of that experience with two really big things. One, almost everything I thought I knew about nutrition was wrong. And most of the common paradigms at the time were in fact wrong. And two, there had to be a better way. So it was that journey of my own health, wanting to find a better solution, and then really being pushed into thinking, okay, what is the way I can get the most bang, literally in 1 minute, humanly possible, that can do so much for me in terms of establishing a great foundation of health. And that's the category, and it's literally foundational nutrition, this idea that you need great micronutrients, you need a breadth of phytonutrients, you need to support your gut. None of us have the perfect diet. Even if you think you do, I can guarantee you that the nutrients in your food are not as dense or high quality or as varied as they were even 50 or 100 years ago. I can guarantee you that no one you've met has perfect gut health. We've all been exposed to antibiotics, environmental toxins, pretty nasty processed food, sleepless nights, international travel, all sorts of interesting microbials that sort of you wouldn't normally be exposed to. And I think, there's this growing awareness of, look, and sort of if you think about our business and the evolution of our business and sort of the movement or the mission behind the business, our business is, we have a mission. We are a mission-based business. Our mission is to empower people to take ownership of their own health. It is both the ownership, which is the responsibility is mine, and I'm going to do something about it, and that health dynamic, which is sort of making sure you're doing the right things and taking ownership of your health, is this first layer on a step of having a spectacular life. So as part of that, and now there is this more and more growing awareness in this sort of movement, if you will, which was already building and is reflected partially in sort of the wellness mega trend around the world. But I think far more just in the general psychology of very, very disparate age groups, ranging from people in their 20s right through to people in their 60s and 70s who are continually trying to up their game on how they approach this dynamic of a lifestyle approach and owning the inputs to having a very healthy, spectacular life. And as part of that, there is awareness that, hey, getting nutrition, getting nutrients in, and supporting gut health are really key pillars in making sure you're truly set up for success. So inside that space, what we did when I originally started was I got some of the smartest people in the world, a couple of very talented naturopaths, a clinical researcher, a very forward-thinking functional MD, and started putting together an idea of what would sort of an amazing one-and-done foundational nutrition product look like, what would it have in it, and how could it be put together. And simply by the sheer nature of just how much nutritional content you'd want in there, and also because I truly believe that you're far better off to have this happen in a beverage, for reasons I can explain a bit later, it went powder. So basically it is a powder. It would be the equivalent of 16 to 20 large capsules. If you were to hold them in your hand, that is how much it would be. It covers everything from making sure you're ingesting enough micronutrients. These are the vitamins and minerals that are literally the key players in the billions of chemical transactions and processes that happen in your body every day. And the other part is that they're the key building blocks alongside macro ingredients, so protein, fats, carbs, which most people are familiar with. But the micronutrients are the key building blocks alongside those. And your entire body is rebuilt from what you eat within a year, with the exception of your tooth enamel. There are many parts of your body that are completely turned over in 80 to 90 days. So you sort of end up with this dynamic of, well, if you are deficient in any micronutrient, and we're not talking about being compared under the bell curve to the average human you see at a Walmart, which unfortunately is sort of the comparison you're being given. Oh, you're in a normal range, not necessarily you're in an optimal range to really survive, thrive, and just have this spectacular life. So a lot of the growing awareness of, I'm going to need to do something to support my diet for the nutrients I get into my mouth is growing and growing and growing, as is the understanding that on top of covering off your micronutrients, you want a breadth of phytonutrients there. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. One is there's some amazing compounds in the phytonutrients. And two, this hugely supports your gut, which is kind of the next phase is there's not a lot of point of putting things in your mouth if you can't absorb them properly. So just having more nutrients in your diet doesn't solve the piece unless you're actually working hard on absorption and utilization. And the gut, as everyone is becoming aware, is the portal into your body. It's where nutrients enter your body. And it's also extremely important in terms of how your body is approaching immune function, inflammatory responses, mood, the famous second brain, and even small changes to sleep can modulate your gut. Small changes to the gut can modulate sleep. Like there's literally no area of your health and life that having a healthy gut doesn't impact. So what we wanted to do was cover off each of those and then put them in all into one in a way where they work synergistically. And the idea of synergy simply means working together for a better outcome. And in this case, just like in food, you want your nutrients as much as possible to come from food. You want a series of pieces that will support your gut. And because of our modern lifestyles and the way, let's face it, there's not one of us who's living in accordance with our genetic makeup or the expectations of what a human would have had even a few thousand years ago, which is a blink in the eye in terms of evolution. In terms of our light exposure, our food exposure, our chemical exposures, and some of the insults that we give to our body, even right now, looking at this computer screen for many hours in a day is not the biological norm. So there are other ingredients that we also put in there to really support people to layer up from the sort of survival layer into optimal layer. And there's things that are now more commonplace, things like ashwagandha, which is an adaptogen, which can help your body with its stress response over time. Things that support your brain function, things that support your liver function, and some of the elimination pathways in your body. We tried to get it all in there in a way that makes the most sense possible on a daily basis. And when I first started, I made the mistake of calling this product Athletic Greens. I was an athletic guy. I believed I had built, with the help of very smart people, the ultimate daily all-in-one for athletic people. It would replace the multivitamin, a prebiotic, probiotic, any greens, any superfood, any adaptogen, anything you like in sort of that daily foundational piece would literally be like 9 products in one and completely replace them. Yet I'd named it as I grew to sort of realize, into a name that probably doesn't really serve an understanding of exactly just how much nutritional content, let alone the quality of the things that we have in there. And you mentioned when we first started chatting on ultimately building a category, and I believe that's what we've done. We've built this idea of a really, really, really high quality, staggering nutritional content, foundational nutritional product that you wake up, start your day, and you drink. It's a powder you mix in a beverage and you drink. And it's literally in 1 minute, the highest investment you can make in your health in 1 minute a day. There's so much nutrition in there. There's so much high quality in there. And frankly, particularly when we first started, I really over-engineered the product. I know you have a very interesting business audience. I sort of did everything wrong. I didn't work backwards from the market. I didn't work from the dynamic of willingness to pay or any kind of needs-based understanding of the problem I was solving. I just realized, hey, this product this way may be over-engineered. Some of the early advisors I spoke to had businesses in the hundreds of millions who looked at this product, said, this is great, wanted to talk margins, blanched, said, you are never going to pull this off. You do not have the margin to make this product stick. And I believed that actually that wasn't true, because if you can get the right customer and they can bake in the utility of what then was a new behavior, which is wake up in the morning and smash a green-looking beverage, but now has become far more common and is still early on that ascension curve as a sort of human common habit, that if I could do right by our customers, and I've always thought of myself as customer number one, I always think of my parents as customers number 2 and 3. Like I have an obsession on quality and no compromises and continuous improvement, which has been reflected by basically our brand reputation in the market, which is exactly on those 3 things. And we're on our 52nd iteration of this product that was over-engineered and told it's never going to fly. And here we are as a much bigger business that's more recently had a bit of fanfare in the media because we raised some money. But taking it back to that early piece, we literally grew this business by thinking hard on, okay, There are some people who will understand just how much nutritional content is in this, and they range from the folks like Timothy Ferriss through to a lot of nutritionists, a lot of personal trainers, people who could really read a label and understand. And where we grew hugely was in the authentic recommendation from people who understood what it was that we were offering, and then people who subsequently embraced sort of this health ownership mission and this lifestyle dynamic of taking AG1, which is the name of the core product, each and every day. And you asked, like, how did I get into superfoods and these different pieces? That's how I got in. That's kind of where we landed to the product that you're seeing in front of you. So I might have gone a bit long-winded on that. Sorry, Mike.
Not at all, Chris. No, I really appreciate you kind of giving a synopsis of the whole story. So back, like, taking us back to like 2008, right? And you were sick all the time, and when it came to the actual the kind of you were mentioning how some of the common paradigms in nutrition were actually wrong. Was that because there was what do you mean by that? Do you mean that was it how vital micronutrients are, and that just wasn't talked about?
So it's a good question. So I wasn't absorbing nutrients properly at all, and I'm what's known as a non-secretor. I found I don't make the mucosal lining correctly in my colon, and that is the lining that largely dictates huge amounts of your health and your immunity. And it's sort of part of the reason why I was in sort of trouble was because I was very inflamed. My gut was really inflamed. Then I just wasn't getting the right quality nutrition in. And I think the paradigm that has massively shifted then and is now becoming more common understanding is it's not just having the nutrients that matter. You have to have bioavailable nutrients. You have to approach this synergistically with your gut. Then you have to make considerations for the areas where we as humans are not living in accordance with the way we're really made up, and support each of those three. So got to get them in, got to support them in the gut and make sure they're absorbed, and also support your gut to support everything else you do every day. Then you have to think about, hey, where can we go to help on a daily basis support our bodies in the modern environment? And the old way of two pretty crappy quality synthetic tablets smashed together, drunk down, you're good to go is just off. And what you're seeing now is that we are disrupting the living crap out of that entire industry. Is most people who come to us throw away their multivitamin, and that's exactly the way it's supposed to be. This is a better customer-centric way.
And I think as well, you've made it, even though, athletic, AG1, it's you look at it on paper and you say, oh wow, it's $100 a month. It's not cheap, but you were spending back in 2008, $100 a day on supplements to get you kind of yourself right. And so you've also bring down, when it comes to accessibility, this stuff.
That's right, Mike. So, I mean, I crack up, particularly, it has taken us years and years and years of doing what we do in 52 iterations to get to where we are now. We're not sitting on our laurels where iteration 53 is coming out and we're just getting better and better at our sourcing and R&D. And when we first started, we do not have margin remotely typical of the dietary supplement industry. They're, particularly in encapsulated formulas, margins are very, very high. It attracts a lot of players into the space, a lot of sort of marketing first, customer experience second dynamics. Most of the larger incumbents are all built on feet of shelf space as the distribution model. And so they kind of live by spinning up a product with a high frequency to maintain whatever is the trend line for their little bit of shelf space. And that's their business model. And I don't think it's a customer-centric model. It's not focused on how do we give the best customer outcome to the customer. And we just decided to flip that on its head. So I focused first and foremost on building a business around this daily habit and making sure it was customer centric. So I didn't try to do 100 things. We literally just focused on one and just made it as good as we humanly can.
So why a powder? Why did ultimately you land with a powder that would mix with water?
So it's a good question. It's two layers. One, I want you to think about a decanter of wine and rolling 2 pills down the side of the decanter and how much surface area of the decanter it touched. That's one. Now compare to when you actually pour a liquid into the decanter, it disperses broadly and touches so much more surface area of the decanter. That's one. right? You're actually just increasing your ability to absorb by having it in a liquid because it's already sort of broken down a dynamic, which basically if you eat any food, your body just mashes it down to a liquid eventually in anyway, and it touches a lot of surface area. So that's one, and that's why we generally prefer it to happen on an empty stomach. It's not completely vital. You can have it with your coffee, in your coffee, kind of whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. But from an optimal absorption dynamic, putting it in when there's nothing else in there means there's nothing else that has messed things up prior to it going in, and you tend to get a better outcome. So that's one. The second one is just pure utility. This would be 20 capsules, and there are not that many people who are willing to inhale 20 capsules. I've done it. I put them all in my hand and done it. Doesn't look it's not fun, and it's just not customer friendly. So it's the nutritional content and also the outcome are the two reasons why it's a powder that goes into a beverage.
How did you also think about taste as well? And for customers, is it the type of thing where you almost could ignore the taste just because you're getting so much? It's a once a day, thing, and you ignore it, or like what was kind of your approach from that standpoint as well?
The approach was a painful one, Mike. So without utility, you have no product. So inherently, if you draw a pie chart and you cut off half the pie chart, and the top half was ultimately the efficacy around the customer experience, and you cut the pie chart into 2/4 at the bottom, and you're sort of looking at dynamics of utility, and then are they actually taking it all the time? And where you're left with basically, man, if it's not good enough tasting, most people won't. They're not going to do it. And so then you're left with, okay, we put a lot of these nutritive pieces in there, Mike. Most of those taken individually do not taste good. I cringe everywhere when I see other players in any kind of nutrition space, and the compromises they are just so happily willing to do. Anything from cheap gums to hidden sugars to layering in all sorts of not particularly good for you sweeteners to stacking in various juice types that just bring the sugar count right up, and they're just kind of hiding the taste behind things that aren't good for you, and I call that compromising. It's a bit like putting in the cheaper, nastier version of an ingredient because it'll save you margin, but you're compromising on your customer, and it's the same across the board. So it took us a staggering amount of time to figure out how to get that tasting right, and there was a lot of tinkering and a lot of swearing, and then a lot more tinkering. And then, of course, where you're at now as well is sort of palates around the world are slightly different. The North American palate is a slightly sweeter palate than it would be. I'm from New Zealand originally. I moved to the States sort of 2008, 2009. So you sort of have to modulate the understanding. Okay. And then even then, for some people, it's a slightly sweet taste. For others, they start pinching their noses, and we get a lot of people who mix it with lemon, sort of mix it with something else for a period as they start to get used to it. And then what we find is a lot of people kind of are terrified if they're sort of taste obsessed and they haven't really tried some of these pieces before, and then they taste it like, it's not that bad. And then once they start to bake in the habit, they get to a point where they embrace it, and we kind of call it's a taste of health. It's something sort of our customers look forward to, and you can't please everyone with taste, and it's a good call out, but I think we've done a pretty good job of hitting the bulk of the bell curve with this one.
How did you also, I know that a big theme to part of, the success for AG1 is really creating this new habit for people to create. I don't think, there has always been like a habit maybe for those that take supplements of taking like a supplement, per day, but not really on like taking a mix that actually is consumed, as a liquid. But how did you think about, because I imagine it was probably pretty challenging at the very beginning to kind of convince people that this is something that you need to, take every day, and kind of the reasons why. What was kind of your approach to kind of developing that and kind of getting on early customers that would actually be retained?
So it's a very good question. At the end of the day, if you consider even something in health, and I kind of stack the priorities in life of health first, your key relationships next, then investing your most precious resource, your time, in something that has purpose and meaning for you. And I really always, having had health, having lost health, having got health back, I put that health first. I mean, put your own oxygen mask on first, and then you're greater able to help others. And I think as it relates to health, and you look at the different pillars of health, you have massively growing awareness of sleep and how important it is. You have massively growing awareness of exercise and how important it is. And you have massive growing awareness of nutrition and how important it is. So you also have sort of elements of emotional health, and we could say there are 4 pillars. We could add in a 5th one, which is light and outdoors and vitamin D exposure. And you could do it a couple of different ways. But at the end of the day, it is the inputs you make towards those pillars every day that either unlock or break health for you. And for each of those pillars, there's a few simple things that really make the bulk of the difference. It's that 80-20 principle in full effect. It is not overly complicated. And I do think some people can really overcomplicate it. And, again, sort of thinking about what the 80-20 looks like, sleep a lot in a pitch dark room and try to be as consistent as possible. Expose yourself to light early in the day, get moving to help set that body clock. Try to move as often as you can. And there are a couple of sort of next layer rules on how much exercise would be optimal. And in nutrition, you need to make sure you're overall eating in a format that doesn't cause crazy spikes in blood sugar, and eating in a way that doesn't lead to an inflammatory response, like mess you up. And then once you've covered those two, you have to make sure you're eating enough high quality nutrients and supporting your gut health so that everything works better. And to get that supportive layer for us, and we never try to say, hey, this is a silver bullet. And we've never gone out with that approach of, don't worry, you can just eat whatever you want the whole time. You don't have to worry because you're smashing your AG1. Because that's not the advice I'd give to you. It's not the advice I'd give to your parents or my parents on how they should embrace it. I said, look, your approach to food and your ownership of trying to eat as well as you can around food quality, which regardless of your ideology around food is basically the food on the outside ring of your supermarket. Whole real food should drive the bulk of the food you eat, and stay away from sugars, heavily processed food, and nasty seed oils. And that's the 80-20 on nutrition. And then as long as making sure you hit sort of a protein target every day, and you kind of have that one largely covered. And then from the habitual side for us, we realize that when people adopt a ritualistic approach and have a place where the great habits sit in the day, they get done. So you want it simple. I'm a huge believer in essentialism, to focus on the few things that really matter. I love the book, by the way, by Greg McKeown. It's literally, it is the number one strategy book you'll ever read for business. And I think so many people get strategy wrong. And I think it's the number one book as well for understanding, hey, there are a few basic things which if you do them consistently, and consistency trumps intensity, they will compound to winning. And one of those is making sure day in, day out, you're doing something great to make sure you're ticking off that nutrients box and you're supporting your gut health. And if you then want to turn around and just trash that puppy with everything else you do, it's not going to lead you to Vegas, as you might say. It's better than doing nothing. But the whole part of what we're trying to do to people is say, hey, wherever you are on this health ownership journey, and I'm not sure where you are, Mike, but we literally have people who are Olympic athletes going for another medal, through to people who have just gotten off the couch, and this is one of the 2 things they do every day in their own health ownership journey. One is get up, smash AG1, and the other is go for a 20-minute walk. And that's where they're at in the journey. And I love that. We're here to empower them to move up and across that journey. And the most rewarding pieces for me is when I meet AG1 customers and I hear their stories about first their own health ownership journey, then about their life ownership journey that starts to cascade as a result.
Thinking about when you were first, when it was first Athletic Greens and maybe focusing on athletes, and you were wanting to appeal to people that were very kind of nutrition focused, maybe our athletes are athlete focused. And I know that you said that a lot of maybe your rise or what, really worked well for back when it was called, Athletic Greens was these authentic relationships and partnerships, essentially with people that have a lot of influence in these areas, like Tim Ferriss and Peter Attia, who I know is a scientific advisor for you all. How did you approach that from the very beginning and kind of be able to kind of build and nurture these relationships early on?
So I think the power of relationships is huge, and the greatest thing about a relationship is it's yours to win or lose, and that is be amazing, give more than you ask for, turn up consistently, and you can build a relationship. And I think as a brand, the future of brand building is in the quality of the relationship you ultimately form with your customer, and we can talk a little about that later. But in terms of this, it's just I've always committed to doing the right thing by people, and I think over time, as a form of friendships, and have never asked for anything. So the first time I found out that Tim Ferriss, who's a long-term friend and had tried many early iterations as a guinea pig of what was then called Athletic Greens, now called AG1, was when I realized, hey, I think I've named this product the wrong thing. Here I am sort of figuring out go-to-market in North America, and greens is a category that is mainly made up of very cheap bulk ingredients, most of which humans shouldn't consume in quantity in frequent cases, and they're not high quality, and they have a very different price point. And he replied to me, hey man, don't change the name now. I've incorporated that product in my book, The 4-Hour Body, and it's gone to print. And for good or bad, at that time, I went, okay, I won't change the name. But of course, the number one question we get is something you alluded to. Hey, Athletic Greens is $100. It's actually $79 if you subscribe, which is the smartest way to get a habit dialed in. It's less than $3 a day. It's less than your cup of coffee at your favorite coffee store. It is more nutrition in 1 minute than you can get anywhere else in the world. And if you were to go and get all those ingredients yourself, even assuming you could get them at the same quality, which I know this industry and I doubt, it would cost you hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and it would take you so much time. And power to you if you want to go that route. But part of what we do is we do the hard work. We invest both the time and the research for you. The reason why we keep updating that formula is we keep making it better as we become aware of new research. So that's sort of our value prop, is like, how do we give people the power of foundational nutrition in the most efficacious, simple way possible? And then to your early point, make sure that embracing that from a lifestyle approach. And because that is a very authentic message, and we've never said anything ever that is sort of, yeah, just go eat pizza the whole time, you'll be fine if you take an AG1. And because we've ruthlessly and relentlessly, consistently just focused on quality and nutritional content, and we sort of set the bar. We literally pioneered the quality standards that are slowly becoming more mainstream in North America. We were the first to pioneer this sort of powdered formula at all. We were the first to pioneer this much nutritional content in one product at all. Still, as far as I can see, the only, but we're the first. Then we pioneered a quality standard. There's an outfit called the TGA, which is the Australian Therapeutic Goods Authority, and they're considered widely to be the most stringent quality control standards for natural products. It's a pharmaceutical standard. We pioneered having that as our floor, our minimum acceptable standard 12 years ago. And same with NSF for sport, which basically gives athletes the comfort that not only is everything you say on the label in the product, there's nothing else. And just sort of have always sort of pioneered that layer. So when you build any kind of relationship, you build trust over time. When you continually outperform against that trust, your relationship grows. And in the instances you asked about Tim Ferriss, we never engaged in any financial dynamic at all with anything Athletic Greens. Basically until many years later. There was no endorsement set up and being in the 4-Hour Body. He just put it in because he takes it every day and he loves it. Very grateful for both the friendship, and he's been an amazing friend, and the support of our brand and product, and the push for people to take more ownership of their own health and life and business and everything, which he's done, which is really cool to watch. And I think over time, we'd never done anything with him financially until we began advertising on some of the early podcasts back in the day. And with Peter Attia, you will rarely meet just those two names together, Timothy Ferriss and Peter Attia, two people who are more ruthlessly stringent in how much they quality control anything that they want to align themselves with. Peter's an amazing human. He's an intellectual powerhouse, and we're very proud to have him as an advisor. And mate, I think you build relationships, you build trust, and you can lose them in seconds, and you just have to live by building the long-term relationship. And when you do that authentically with a give proposition, then ultimately you form a relationship, and great things can happen. And I've taken that approach. Like, if no matter what in this approach, this is not my first business. I'm building the business I love, solving problems that I love for people that I love with a team that I love, to help humanity. And I love humans. So it's kind of my dream gig, and I'm determined to do it the right way. And I think that like any brand, building a brand is the hardest thing. It takes the longest time, because ultimately it's about building trust and water under the bridge. So when we've encountered people, Mike, who could have blown us up or done amazing things, or were whiz kids in XYZ, or we'll partner with you, but sort of something was sort of not quite what we'd want from our own standards, we've just said no every single time, and have never taken the shortcuts, have never adopted any approach like that, and have only ever lived by our own values. And I think the longer and longer you do that, the more people whose stars are very bright are willing to align their stars with your brand. And I'm very happy and very proud that we've taken that long-term approach, and will always do so.
Wow, no, I really appreciate you saying how really actually talking about how you actually met Tim and also Peter. I know both of them talk as well a lot about. I'm a huge fan of both their podcasts, and talk about how intermittent fasting can be really helpful for gut health. Does taking AG1, does that actually interrupt a fast or no?
No, so I mean, in a pure sense, a true fast should be water only, and so anything else other than water would technically be interrupting. But from the sense of, is AG1 a significant source of calories, particularly the mighty protein, fats, and sugars? The answer is no. So the dynamic there would not interfere with your fast, is very accretive to gut if you're trying to fast for gut health. And we have people who literally are fasting, say, 8 p.m. till midday, who take AG1 on waking with great results. And then we have people who take AG1 15 minutes before their first full solid meal of the day. And it's a popular combo.
How did you approach as well distribution in your sales channels? Obviously, I'd imagine ordering AG1 via the website is the most ideal way, but how did you also think about retail partnerships, and as well as putting AG1 on Amazon? How are just overall you were thinking about company growth?
Well, Mike, if you consider out there in the mighty world of the internet, there's so much clutter and there's so much stuff, and it's kind of hard to tell what's flavor of the month, what really works. And this is where I think the power of authenticity starts to come in. And whenever we've looked at any partner, like I mentioned earlier, like regardless of how much money they could have made us and success they could have had, if we didn't feel that they were living with the authenticity, like if they didn't really, really, really love AG1 and take it every day, we didn't want to work with them. And over time, we've used that authentic recommendation to have a warm introduction to our brand. And our product is only sold on athleticgreens.com. You can't get it anywhere else. And for a little while, we were also on Amazon for a period. So I like to have the relationship with our customers. I like to make sure that we're doing the best we can by them. And I like having the responsibility to look after the relationship. If you have a relationship that is a direct one, it's yours to win or lose. And that suits me, and it suits our business. And I think if you look at the shift of companies like Nike, where they're trying more and more to sort of own that relationship versus sort of the broader spread of how they are across their distributors. And there's sort of no right or wrong way in terms of how brands can grow. But I personally think that building on the relationship you form with your customers in a two-way relationship is the future of brand building. And it's the part a lot of people get wrong. I think there's a lot of marketing first people playing in various D2C companies who aren't thinking value to their customer long-term relationship. They tend to flame up and die. Then you have a lot of incumbents who are running off the old model, which tends to be not particularly customer-centric product solutions. And it's slowly shifting, but they're very slow. And when I look at distribution, it's pretty simple. Trust, authenticity, accretive to our brand, accretive to their brand. And are we getting a type of customer who's actually likes what we have to offer, but likes the problem we solve and believes they can approach this from a lifestyle dynamic? And we're not in a hurry to go crazy broad from a distribution dynamic to spin for a near-term result. We want that long-term win. So we're not in retail. We're not seeking anytime soon to start to go crazy in the retail or anything else. We'd like to continue to build on the trust and relationships we've got.
No, that's helpful. That's really helpful, and really focusing on that relationship with the customer. I know. How also did you approach fundraising and maybe financing the business? Because I know you went through, you really were kind of bootstrapped, right, up until quite recently. What was kind of your approach from the early days?
I've had some amazing mentors in my business journey, starting with my dad, who's the most phenomenal. I just hit the lottery with my parents. They're incredibly supportive and always encouraged me to think for myself. But one of my early mentors was a guy called Keith Cunningham, and he's a phenomenal business coach. And I encourage every entrepreneur, every executive, every business builder to just Google him. I have no affiliation. Keith Cunningham, Keys to the Vault. He's got some very neat books and a very interesting way of approaching financial literacy and education. So this idea of building a sustainable long-term business and doing a good enough job with and for your customers so that your customers imparting their money for the value that they receive, which is the idea, will then fund your ability to grow. What other way is there to grow a business that's intelligent from a long-term dynamic? Is actually the paradigm I had coming in. And so to us, we basically bootstrapped the business from inception until 2021. And we hadn't deployed a single dollar of equity capital until we were at $168 million run rate revenue. And frankly, we could have gone forever bootstrapping. Just realized that we needed to step more into the opportunity. We needed to. We have a very thirsty supply chain. We have a cash thirsty supply chain. It's a very complex supply chain. We always want to get our hands on the absolute best ingredients in the world, and so it just required a bigger bank balance than we could do it just organically. And so that led to a decision, which was the first of, we're going to take external funding. Yep. And the very first was a smaller check, very strategic, intentionally looking for people who could help share the story of AG1 with their tribe, their audience, their networks, and who kind of understood that brand building dynamic. And then we followed that shortly with a more significant investment where I wanted, and I'm very, very happy with our investors, and where I wanted basically a significant capital on the balance sheet to be able to unlock multiple years of growth for our business. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any details.
I can imagine that your supply chain's pretty. Is it fully verticalized, your supply chain?
No, we have some of the best quality sourcing R&D humans on the planet. I love them. They work so hard. They're so smart. They're so passionate. And over 10, 12 years, you start to find out, frankly, who's great and who's, let's just say, not great. And then you form relationships and do everything you can to do right by the great. And very proud of our vendor partnerships. We're not vertically integrated, but we control in some dynamic or other the entire supply chain. So we just don't own our own manufacturing. So it's very important. Quality is insanely important, and there's been all sorts of supply chain interestingness that's been happening in the world. And I think for us, I'm very, very proud of what the team's done there and how they've managed to not just meet our quality standards, but improve them over time with scale, which is no easy feat. And it has been a lot of hard work.
It seems like, I mean, overall, like your journey has been just really just been obviously incredible. But I'm sure there's also maybe some low moments which there always is when it comes to company building. What were maybe some of like your biggest learnings from building AG1?
So I think there are a lot, and I, like many entrepreneurs, I have a pretty tumultuous journey. I've tried a lot of things. I've had a lot of learnings, including significant punches in the nose, and I take ownership of all the mistakes, any naivety, any errors, any decisions. Like I take ownership of the whole lot. They're part of the learnings that ultimately have led us to build the business as we have. I think early, when I kicked things off, and we went to market, which was really sort of towards the end of 2010. Then we properly launched January 2011, and then have iterated the product 52 times over the subsequent 10 years. And I think the advice I would sort of go back and give myself, which I actually covered in a Thrive Global article, would be around, hey, I had a very bold vision, but I kind of kept a lot of that to myself and wasn't really as audacious as I believe I should have been, or definitely as I would be now if I went back. And I was too slow to focus on recruiting amazing talent. So I bootstrapped. I'm very good at looking after our customer. I'm very good at running a business that way. But I think I was too slow to really recruit great talent. And like many entrepreneurs, I've tried a lot of different things. So literally, literally when I was launching AG1, I was coming out of a failed former business venture. There was a period where I was living on friends' couches for months at a time. I can remember going through my sofa the last time I had paid rent in 2010, living through my security deposit, literally looking for change to go around the corner to the little Cuban place. This was in Miami, to buy rice and beans. And that was a low point. I can remember screenshotting the bank accounts. I can remember screenshotting, basically my negative dollar balances everywhere. And then I sent myself an email and just said, remember this feeling. And it's been an interesting journey, man. It's never just up and to the right. So, when I go back and look at some of those pieces versus where we are now, I'm very grateful. I love meeting our customers. And I also feel like saying to myself, recruit talent early and just do that again, and like just say that again and again and again. Once you've figured out some idea of the what, focus on the who. And so now, I mean, the leadership team I have now at AG is spectacular. I have Kat Cole, who's one of the most phenomenal business people I've ever met, just full stop, period. She's spectacular human and so talented as my co-leader in running this business. And she is legit world-class. So that would be the main piece of advice is I did the right things. I focused on the customer. I focused on the long term. I never compromised. And I really built everything for the long term, and I kept going. So when you fall over, you need to stand up and take another step. And that I did, and I'm very proud of it. And I'm very proud of, even in the hardest, darkest moments of despair, coming out of bankruptcy, litigation, and everything else, I made the highest integrity, best steps towards building the right long-term future. And I'm very proud of the decision tree I exercised in that moment. And I'm very proud of what we've built, frankly. I'm in the business of helping people feel awesome, Mike. I get to speak to amazing humans like you who want to hear about the journey. At some point in this, I'll start pushing you about your own health ownership and how can you get the people you love to take more ownership. And we'll get this movement flying, and we will literally change the world through a daily nutritional powder.
For early entrepreneurs, since you said that, from the beginning, maybe one of the missteps was recruiting great talent. When you don't maybe have a big track record, like obviously AG1 now is huge, and you have incredible talent around you. But in the kind of early days of, any entrepreneur that's listening, how would you go about kind of recruiting great talent and getting people to kind of believe your vision and, maybe leave their incredible jobs in order to join you?
Yeah, so I think so this one has a couple of layers to it. One is, where are you on the product market match dynamic? Inherently, entrepreneurship is about adding or creating value, where previously there was either none or less, depending where you are in your business journey. And to do that, you have to be adding value. And I have this very simple formula, which I've coached to like a lot of the people who've been with me for a long time. And it is understanding this dynamic of adding value times leverage. And so what is the value you're adding to the world, and how you're doing it in a structure that is leverage? And do you have a dynamic of solving problems customers want to be solved that they're going to embrace and adding value to their lives? And can you do that with leverage? And depending on what that business model ends up shaking out will vary hugely on who your early investors, mentors, advisors, and everything else are going to be. If you're trying to come out on a winner takes all, we'll need billions of dollars to make this whole vision a reality, and you're going to have to blitz scale because first to win gets the whole pie. That's a very different set of advice that I would give to someone else who's sitting there trying to figure out either something more niche or potentially something more disruptive that has a very different capital stack and requirement. And in the second, I'd be looking for mentors who were more of the angel investor type, former operators who'd been there, done that. And I'd be obsessively focused on the customer. Literally, how are you solving the problem for your customer? And what are the learnings you can take from that? That obsession with the customer has to stay forever. And there's only two words I want people to understand, and that is reorder business. You want to be in the reorder business, not the order business. And this is the biggest mistake I see entrepreneurs today making, where the barriers to entry are so low that anyone with a credit card with a 10 grand limit can start a company and off you go. So I think that they're failing to think through, what problem are you solving? Do people care about it? Are you truly adding value? And what business are you in? And yeah, be in the reorder business. It's literally the number one bit of advice I'd give, along with focus, audacious vision, recruit people to the team who can really help you, depending on sort of your business model and what winning ultimately looks like. You may be looking for people who are looking for moonshot bets with all the risks that come with it for you as a founder and for them as investors. Very, very different risk profile for everyone involved. And versus, no, I can actually start in a more customer obsessed, one great customer at a time business structure, which is what I have. I literally believe in this business even now. It's just we win and lose by one great customer at a time. And I scream and I cry every time we lose a great customer that I know we should have been able to keep. And I think for people starting out early in the journey would be thinking through, depending which of those structures you're after, an advisory team that is set up to help you win the long term, and obsessively focus on recruiting the talent for the next year and a half, 2 years of that journey, and never, never, never take your eyes off the customer in that reorder business, that you are there to serve them, full stop, period.
For AG1, how would you describe how you approach scaling? Would you say that you subscribe to blitz scaling? Would you say, like, how would you kind of describe, what do you think about like your strategy through since you founded the company?
Well, I mean, in the early days, I was coming out of deep debt. I was determined, and bankruptcy. I was determined that I would pay back everyone who I owed money to. And so there was a weighted risk adjustment on no matter what, the company could never fail, which frankly actually is, I actually believe is the only way you should really run your business. And unless you are in one of the moonshot winner takes all dynamics, in which case you may actually be better to take a very different outsized approach, and because you're playing for something quite unique. Now, in our business, like an Apple, like a Nike, even like Tesla, although Tesla's sort of cap stack just to get into business is insane. So it's kind of maybe a bad example. It's still one great customer at a time. And I think for us, it is, we're willing to grow as hard and as fast as we can, as long as it is a great customer and we're doing a great job by them. We sort of, as Kat calls it, we want the wheels on the cart to wobble but not come off. And ultimately, being able to deliver on that customer promise is the number one. And clearly, we don't want the wheels to come off. So it's not true blitzscaling in the Reid Hoffman sense of the word. It's a great book. It's very interesting. But there is a dynamic of lean into the growth where you can take it and be very bold and audacious and courageous in how you're willing to experiment. Just know that not all those experiments will work out.
This is awesome. Thank you. No, thanks so much for that. Chris, this has been such a delight. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Mike, it was a pleasure. Hope I answered your questions. It was good to chat to you.
And there you have it. It was awesome chatting with Chris. I hope you enjoyed listening and learning about the story of AG1. If you also love this content and learning more about consumer startups and VC, subscribe to the newsletter at theconsumervc.substack.com, also available in show notes. Thanks for listening.